Kava.
Ramon, you
Ramon Rubacava.
Here.
Thank you. Teresa Taylor.
Here.
Shonda Wesley.
Here.
Lynn Paquin for Betty Yee.
Here.
That concludes roll call, Mr. President.
thank you, Ms. Hopper. The next item on the agenda is approval of the June 17, 2020 Board of Administration time agenda. Do I have a motion?
Move approval.
Moved by Ms. Taylor, second by Ms. Brown. Roll call, Ms. Hopper.
Margaret Brown.
Aye.
Rob Fechner.
Aye.
Frank Ruffino for Fiona Ma.
Aye.
Lisa Middleton.
Aye.
David Miller.
Aye.
Stacy Oliveris.
Aye.
Michelle Mitchell for Irena Ortega.
Aye.
Jason Perez.
Aye.
Ramon Rubacava. Ramon.
Yes.
Teresa Taylor.
Aye.
Shonda Wesley.
Aye.
Lynn Paquin for Betty Yee.
Aye.
All
Okay.
set, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hopper. The next item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance, and I've asked Ms. Taylor to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Great. Thank you. Hand over hearts. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United
United
States
States.
of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Taylor. Okay, I typically begin each, beg your pardon?
Sorry, my bad. The screen went blank completely for a minute.
Okay, you there now? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, I typically begin each CalPERS board meeting with a statement intended to engage and inform our members, employees, partners, and the public about the goals and priorities of CalPERS as a pension fund. There is, however, nothing typical about where we all find ourselves today. Our country, and in fact our world, is on the precipice of change. Not the type of change driven by marketing, PR, slogans, platitudes, but the type of change that births an awakening to the racial and economic inequalities that exist in societies where people don't really see each other or see ourselves in one another. The killing of George Floyd on May the 25th was inhumane and jarring. And as a familiar reminder of lived experience of many Black people and people of color. It was a public display of what so many experienced privately without the benefits of witnesses. It was a clarion call for people around the world to acknowledge each other's humanity. Mr. Floyd's killing has sparked a worldwide conversation about race and racism, healthcare and educational disparities, housing and job insecurity, and circumstances that create those conditions. His death is forcing us to acknowledge and deal with race and inequality, and was yet another reminder for how far we have to go in our nation, in our communities, and in our public and private institutions. I grew up in a segregated South, and I know what racism was and what it felt like. And despite working as a public employee for 37 years, serving children and employees of Los Angeles Unified School District, and now serving as the first Black president of CalPERS Board of Administration, I still know what racism feels like. I also know what it means to identify and confront it. And I know how people and systems can be changed when we understand that acknowledging racism or classism or sexism or any other inequality does not diminish the experience of any other group of people. It only serves to heighten our humanity if we can see ourselves in one another. That's why the protests we see around the world are filled with Black, white, Latino, Asian Pacific Islanders, and indigenous people. People are young and old, rich and poor, and those who are LGBTQ, who just this week in a 6-3 decision by the Supreme Court was guaranteed protection against discrimination in the workplace. This occurs when we shine a light on inequalities and inequities and see the humanity in one another. CalPERS is the nation's largest public pension fund, serving more than 2 million public employees and retirees. As such, we have a moral imperative to confront racism and economic inequality. We have an opportunity to do more as an investor, as a healthcare purchaser, and as fiduciaries. I'm proud of CalPERS's commitment to diversity and inclusion. However, I look forward to working with this board and our leadership team to identify ways in which we can continue to reflect and expand on our commitments. So thank you for allowing me to share my thoughts with you today. Okay, we now go to Ms. Frost.
Henry,
Oh, wait just a minute. Teresa, I'm sorry.
that's okay.
Ms. Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. And I also want to take a moment of personal privilege. Thank you very much for those moving remarks. But I wanted to make some remarks in light of this extremely unusual and important time that we are living through right now. And first, I want to say to everyone that's listening, I hope everyone is well, staying safe, and taking care of themselves and their loved ones at home. As Vice President of the CalPERS Board of Administration and Investment Committee Chair, I believe it is important for me to highlight what we have begun to recognize as risks to the fund that perhaps we've not given the attention that they deserve. First, the COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted that workers, grocery workers, postal workers, transit workers, warehouse workers, fast food workers, meat processing plant workers, building cleaners, and security officers are high-risk employees. Not just because they are frontline workers, but also they are workers whose employers do not provide health care and whom the workers had to fight to be provided with personal protective equipment and sanitized workplaces. I want to recognize the important statement that SEC Chair Clayton made entitled "The Deep and Essential Connections Among Markets, Businesses, and Workers, and the Importance of Maintaining Those Connections in Our Fight Against COVID-19. He then went on to say, quote, "I believe that the strength of our economy and many of our public companies is due in significant and increasing part to human capital, and for some of these companies, human capital is a mission-critical issue," end quote. CalPERS knows that managing human capital is essential to creating long-term value. It is also part of a company's responsibility to managing that risk. Our investment beliefs adopted in 2013 make this clear. They also set out that as a long-term investor, we have a responsibility to future generations, beneficiaries, and taxpayers to ensure we have a thriving and prosperous economy. Let's be clear here. When workers are treated poorly with low wages, no sick leave or vacation leave, they have no choice but to come to work even if they're sick. These earners support their families, and even a few missed days subtracted from their pay can be catastrophic, let alone the costs associated with seeing a healthcare professional. These people are now recognized as quote-unquote frontline workers. We all rely on them for our food deliveries and other important supply chain jobs. The companies that employ them also know how vital these people are to their bottom line, yet workers' basic needs continue to be disregarded. CalPERS has recognized that the treatment of workers or human capital management, if not corrected, poses a long-term risk to our fund. Now COVID-19 has exposed how much of a risk, with unemployment rates at around 14% and pockets of workers all over their country who are forced to come to work because they have no sick leave, and COVID-19 outbreaks are happening at those workplaces. Fast food restaurants, warehouses, meat packing plants, we've all heard it on the news, and then it's transmitted to those employees' communities. We must recognize that we have to do better for our country's workers. This is what our human capital management work is about at CalPERS. The SEC chair's statement recognized this when he said that companies need to start reporting on this, and we must be consistent with a continuing commitment to health and safety. We take our human capital management work forward with that same consistent continuing commitment. Just as we came to understand that climate change poses a risk and opportunity across our portfolio, so too does human capital management. For that reason, I'm looking forward to CalPERS Board's annual offsite, where we will have a session on human capital management to examine these issues, consider the research, and learn from others and develop our strategy as fiduciaries. Additionally, COVID-19 disproportionately impacts the African American communities, and this highlights another impact of injustice. The structural racism that permeates our society is something for every one of us, every American, to address. African Americans are 3 times more likely to die from COVID-19. African American workers are more likely to be relegated to low-wage work, and discrimination against Black and Latino candidates in hiring has not declined in 25 years. We also need to understand that in the United States, as a society, we need to tackle systemic racism in employment, housing, education, healthcare, and our justice system. Finally, African Americans have little access to capital, which otherwise would give them the ability to move out of poverty and hence keeps the cycle going. The pandemic's disproportionate impact on Black families and the senseless killings of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and so many more have brought this country to a new conversation around race and racism. It is important that we as CalPERS reflect that we have a very diverse membership, and our CalPERS team is very diverse as well, and that our team works diligently to expand diversity on corporate boards. We've recognized that diversity is a strength, and companies with diverse boards outperform those without appropriate representation. But how do we mitigate the long-term risk that structural racism poses to CalPERS in the capital markets? Can we call for an end to racism in access to capital? If we are not thinking about everything that racism touches and work to eliminate it, we will be making the mistake of continuing systemic racism and hurting our own members and continuing the long-term risk. In this moment, when we are all listening and beginning to understand something that African Americans have been going through for 400 years, that structural racism pervades every part of our society. I applaud CalPERS for its history of work on human capital management, which is inclusive of diversity at CalPERS and diversity on corporate boards of companies in which we invest. It is not enough. We need to push harder. The percentage of African Americans on corporate boards is 3.9%. The percentage of women is 21%, and then all people of color on corporate boards is still very low at less than 10%. We must recognize this cannot continue. The work of our corporate governance program shows what still needs to be done. I'm proud that over half the companies that CalPERS has engaged added a diverse board member, which was close to 400 new seats. But there is more to do. As we call to recognize human capital management as important a risk as climate change to our fund, we need to double our efforts here at CalPERS to improve and mitigate these risks. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Frost.
Thank you, President Jones. Much has happened since we last met as a board in April. 2 months ago, we were just a few weeks into dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, the governor's quarantine orders, and then our efforts to seamlessly continue our daily work by moving almost all of our employees into a remote capacity. Today, we have 85% of our employees who are teleworking quite successfully, and approximately 300 of our team members remain on site. And for those 300 team members, it's really the case of not being able to conduct their work remotely. These are individuals who are working in our mailroom, some individuals working in our contact center, individuals working in our imaging system. So we applaud their efforts of getting up every day and coming into the building, and we certainly support them. But also, as we were doing this, the investment office was also navigating one of the most volatile financial periods in our history to minimize the impact to the fund. But even more importantly, I think, is to capitalize on some of these short-term disruptions or opportunities that we actually have some likelihood of success this time. Then at the end of last month, as mentioned by the president as well as the vice president, came the horrible death of George Floyd in Minneapolis, followed by protests here in Sacramento, around our state, and around the nation. It had a profound impact on many of our colleagues, our friends, as well as our family. And I would like to spend a few minutes this morning talking about our response to the events of the past 3 weeks, as well as our efforts to maintain our customer service levels and deliver pension and health benefits to all of our members and our participants. Let me begin with what I believe is the foundation of our work here, and that is the culture. We have faced 3 catastrophic events, any one of which could break an unhealthy organization that did not have a solid foundation to work from. We built CalPERS on a foundation of member focus. We built it on high levels of team member engagement and productivity, as well as being a reliable partner, not only to the 3,000 participating employers, but to many stakeholders who are very interested in how CalPERS will navigate these really difficult and interesting times. But I'm consistently impressed and inspired by the team at CalPERS. We just have just under 2,900 employees around the state, whether those are in our regional locations or whether in the headquarters buildings. The team has just been open, they've been flexible, they've been trying to balance this, the side of their professional job, as well as new family obligations, and they're doing quite well. We've never stopped moving forward. As a result, our work continues to find ways to optimize our investment returns, understanding there are significant risks ahead of us, but it's critical. It's our mission to be able to provide retirement security to 2 million people. We are facing COVID-19 and then also adapting to a virtual working environment. And as you'll see, we're maintaining our focus on addressing challenges of climate change to help forge more sustainable financial markets. But nothing really is more important to CalPERS and our society for that matter than the manner in which we treat one another, the way we see one another, and the way that we stand up for one another. Out of the tragedy of recent weeks came the opportunity to listen with an open mind, to learn from others with care and compassion, listening to understand before you seek to be understood, and come together in universal opposition to racism and discrimination in all of its forms. So I'd like to talk a little bit about our diversity and inclusion framework that we have at CalPERS and our teams. We serve members who live in one of the most diverse states, if not the most diverse state in the country. Meeting their needs with the sensitivity they deserve requires open-mindedness and compassion, as I stated before, but from everyone who works here, whether we're on the front lines of delivering direct customer service, or whether we're working behind the scenes, or we have a support role in some capacity. Each person has a unique story, and we want everyone who is a part of the CalPERS team to know that they're valued, they're respected, and that they're heard. Last week, I sent an email out to our employees emphasizing our commitment to diversity and inclusion and how all of the efforts that we've been undertaking, and in particular over the last 4 months, are grounded in our core values of quality, of respect, accountability, integrity, openness, and balance. Our diverse workforce is our strength, and I said that we intend to seize this opportunity to recommit ourselves to these values and really put them into action, that words are really meaningless unless they are followed by action. I received a number of responses to that email, and several employees who were comfortable in talking to me about their personal experiences that they've had as a person of color in the United States, whether that was, at the time that they had as a child, or whether those were times that they had, working where they didn't feel necessarily that there was equal opportunity for promotion or equal opportunity for, developmental job assignments. These stories are really powerful, and they showcase how important it is that we strive to continue to do better. We do have a great foundation to work from. I heard that loud and clear from the number of responses that I received, but you could always go from good to great, as Jim Collins would say. So to begin on our action plan, we'll offer enterprise-wide unconscious bias training for all employees. I would like to make that mandatory, but we need to make sure that that stamp on making it mandatory does not make this training less effective or less successful. So we'll work with the outside experts as we bring this in, and I'll have more to report on that soon. In addition, we have 2 volunteer-led employee resource groups, the CalPERS Diversity and Inclusion Group and the CalPERS Disability Advisory Council. Those 2 groups meet regularly to discuss whatever current issues might be on our employees' minds or on these groups' minds, and then also provide recommendations and guidance, but they also serve as a supportive resource to the team members at CalPERS. Sometimes it's easier to have a peer-to-peer conversation than it is to have a conversation as an employee to someone in human resources or someone in management. So having a team of your peers being able to have these very open, frank conversations, I think has just been part of our culture here and has been appreciated. At last week, our new Enterprise D&I Advisory Council, which we launched earlier this year, met to talk about the next concrete steps in the framework. And they will be providing me an update on their discussions that I will share with the organization, but I will also share that with this board. I did also talk about our role as an influential investor. Being the largest public pension plan in the United States means that we do have some influence, and we need to use our voice wisely. We need to use our voice on the things that matter to us most. And we do advocate for diverse corporate boards for the reasons that Ms. Taylor mentioned. We believe that diversity adds performance, that the more diverse the board is, the better perspectives, the better backgrounds, the better understanding and skill sets that are available to make sound decisions. Human capital also is certainly something that we paid a lot of attention to. We see more need for data and transparency about how the public companies, approximately 10,000 public companies we're investing in, how are they thinking about their workforce? How are they thinking about incentivizing that workforce? And does that align with the values of having this company be successful in the long term? So Board President Jones has also asked that we facilitate a board education event regarding implicit bias or unconscious bias. And if we're unable to find that opportunity before the July meeting, then we will include it as a part of the meetings in July. But really the intent is to try to find something that we could schedule and notice appropriately to the public, that we could bring this education in as a session for the board. The Diversity Council that I mentioned earlier is tasked with identifying the education, the trainers, and the appropriate curriculum, and I'm looking forward to seeing their recommendation. Now I'd like to turn to the work we're doing to deal with the impact of COVID-19. We're anticipating that the governor will give the go-ahead to initiate phase 3 of California's Resilience Roadmap. We think that will happen relatively soon. That means we will then begin the process of slowly returning to our campus, minus the groups of employees who will continue to do their work remotely. And again, this has been a very successful, ended up being a test that we had to adapt to pretty quickly. But I think what we found throughout the organization is that there were likely some attitudes about whether we could actually run our services productively, successfully, remotely. And I think the team has certainly proven that that's the case, that that is in fact true. So we will soon be circulating our return to office work plan. We'll get that out to the team leaders so that they can begin talking with their own team about it. And what those discussions will entail will be the phased implementation. So we plan on starting with the executive team. We think we should try it out on ourselves first, all of the safety protocols, how you get into an elevator, I mean, simple things like that, or the stairwells, one-way stairwells. But we need to try that out on our own, as well as then, the next phase, we could bring some volunteers in. I do hear from a number of individuals that they would like to come back into the office, at least on a part-time basis, that this home isolation has begun to take its toll, and I think we'll have a number of volunteers who will want to come in earlier in the phase. But we're going to take it extremely slowly. We're going to take every precaution possible, and we're going to carefully, follow any guidelines that are set by state or local officials. Our goal really is for our employees and our teams to feel safe and to understand really what's expected of them. So for each group we bring back, the idea is that we'd have a 30-day assessment period in between so that we can assess all the safety protocols, make any modifications or adjustments that may be necessary, and then be able to communicate that out to the next group. Flexibility has been the word of the last 4 months. It will continue to be the key on how we make decisions moving forward. So if you couple that with the updated telework policy, we anticipate that it will be some time before we will have a majority or a significant number of team members back in the office. We don't think that that's going to happen until later this year or early next year. But despite all this change and great uncertainty, we're confident that we'll be able to maintain the historically high level of productivity we've achieved over the last few months, and that CalPERS members will continue to have access to the services that they need. Our operational measures are comprehensive. This was a system we put in place just over 3 years ago. It tracks all of the performance related to our key strategies, but equally importantly, it tracks the operational effectiveness of all the core processes. And we're very transparent about that performance. We place that data and those measurements out on our website as well, if there's anyone who's interested. So while we don't know yet when our offices will be open to the public, we'll continue to serve our customers through phone appointments and through the use of My CalPERS. It is worth mentioning that the member self-service usage for retirement applications through My CalPERS has risen by over 20% since March alone. So at this point, I believe the number that Anthony Sweeney reported out to me during the huddle was about 60% of the retirement applications are now coming through My CalPERS. But that said, we know that there are members who need in-person appointments. So we're working on our reopening plan for all of our regional locations, while also maintaining all the COVID-19 safety protocols to ensure that we're keeping everyone safe. So more to come on that in the days and weeks ahead. So on to a little bit of communication and outreach that we've been doing. We know that during challenging times, you can imagine how important it is to stay in constant communication with your members, with your employees, with your employers, and all number of stakeholders. So with the employees, I started sending out daily emails. I just called them the update of the day, as well as holding Friday video chats with the organization. These web chats have been, I think, a good channel for people to stay up to date on what's happening around decisions, key decisions that we're making as the executive team or from management, and as well as being able to address questions that might be on our employees' minds. We have been providing virtual training to our members, and I think Anthony Sweeney also mentioned at his PHBC update that the first online or virtual CB will be available late July. So looking forward to that. I think our members will certainly appreciate having that available to them as they're contemplating their own retirement and all the various decisions that go into deciding, whether it's time for them. Although we did have to cancel the benefit education events, we are still working forward with the Employer Education Forum that will be held virtually. If you want to mark that date on your calendar, it's October 14th and 15th. And we're anticipating that we'll be able to reach a greater number of our employers. As a result, we're hoping we're going to track attendance. We certainly get a large attendance at our in-person events, but also hoping that the virtual nature of this education event will allow more of the employers to be able to join. So moving on now to investments. On Monday, you received our first report in response to the task force on climate-related disclosures. Climate change is a systemic risk to our portfolio and one of our 3 top organizational priorities. We talk about 3 key risks to the system. The first is our ability to achieve our 7% return long-term. The second is the ability for our employers to continue to pay for the contributions or afford those contributions. And the third is related to climate. So our TCFD sets out the goal of CalPERS' investment strategy on climate change to ensure that we can take advantage of prudent investment opportunities that allow us perhaps to do well, financially and do good for the environment. While the TCFD process is voluntary, we do believe that it should be mandatory. So there is transparency, there's accountability, and consistent information available to investors, to regulators, as well as to the general public. And we had to make some assumptions in our report, and we prefer not to do that the next time we update it. So better data is something that we are going to continue to push for. So the report is a starting point for the data we need to allocate our capital, to exercise our proxy votes, and also to select investment managers who can generate those risk-adjusted returns that we need. So on health rates, the Pension and Health Benefits Committee on Tuesday was given the preliminary health rates for 2021. The process this year was made more complex by unknown financial implications of COVID-19. I think, but our negotiations were also strengthened by data that we collect, data that's in our data warehouse, where we could validate information that was presented through negotiations, but we had a mechanism now by which we could do that, kind of trust but verify. It's given us a more precise picture of each health plan's cost broken down by specific categories that we use to compare with our own projections. So the value of the enhanced transparency, the enhanced use of data really can't be understated as we look at validating rates for our members. We'll come back to you in July with the final rates for approval, and then open enrollment will take place from September 21st through October 16th. And members will have access to all the information they need to make those choices through their MyCalPERS account. So now on to investment performance. So we'll close with that. The effective date of these numbers would be March 31st of 2020. So the 1-year number is 0.4, the 3-year number is 4.6, the 5-year number is 4.7, the 10-year number is 7, and the fiscal year to date is 4.1. Next month at the July meeting, we'll get our first look at the 2019-2020 fiscal year-to-date returns. In the interim, I want to acknowledge the work of our Chief Investment Officer, Ben Meng, and the dedicated team in the investment office. The structural changes we've made combined with Ben's strategic changes, of which many of those have been talked about in board meetings over the last 18 months since Ben's arrival. And I think it puts CalPERS in a much stronger position to weather not only COVID-19 economic crash, but also to weather some of this volatility, take advantage of opportunities in the short run, but never losing sight of the fact that we're a long-term investor, we're patient, and to the extent that we put our capital into illiquid vehicles, we need to make sure that we're being appropriately rewarded for that illiquidity. So that does conclude my report, President Jones, but I am happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Frost. Yeah, Ms. Brown has a question for you, Ms. Frost. Ms. Brown.
Thank you. You told us a lot, so let me see if I can go back through my notes. You talked about the reopening plan. Is that going to be shared with the board in writing? Or?
I can certainly share the reopening plan. I would prefer to get that out into the organization, but I certainly have no issues with sharing it with the board. It should be something you'd be interested in. Give me just a couple weeks. I'd be happy to get that out to everyone.
Excellent, excellent. And then I took a note about the virtual CB. I think that's a great idea. I've attended quite a few of those, and I have sat in the audience and answered questions because people were a little shy about talking about whatever their issue was, whether it be a divorce or about how things might impact their pensions. But I hope there'll be an opportunity for Q&A and either a call in or a text in email. And I actually think we're probably going to get a lot more Q&A because you're distant, so they can't really tell who you are. So we might actually get that. And there's a lot of learning on the Q&A. People have seen it in the audience where somebody will ask a question and then you see everybody scribbling those notes. So hopefully we'll have a lot of opportunity and even leave more time for that. And then what we didn't talk about, what I didn't hear you talk about, all the other issues, but I didn't hear you talk about the state's budget and how we're going to survive that. Because not only for our staff and the work we do, but our local agencies, our cities and our counties that are going to also be seriously impacted. So what's kind of the ideas around that?
Thank you, Ms. Brown. And Mr. Cohen will be giving a more comprehensive report in our July meeting as well as we go through our enterprise performance management system. But essentially the executive team some months ago, we sat down and, after the governor's May revise with the 10% anticipated cut to compensation, the 5% cut in efficiencies. And then we know that that needs to go to the bargaining table. So right now we're waiting to see the results of what has been bargained, and obviously we'll implement accordingly. But in the meantime, we certainly have looked at every expenditure that we have at CalPERS. And I think you mentioned this at one of the committee meetings, that we will have some savings related to the fact that we're not traveling, the fact that we're not doing as much in-person training. And those will be booked as savings, as just kind of these automatic. But we needed to go further than that. We looked at, and remember, we've been doing this for quite some time. We've looked at what we call enterprise position pooling. We've been doing this for over 3 years. We've not requested any new PYs our 4th year in a row. And what we're really trying to accomplish here is a recalibration of the organization, that when a position becomes vacant, we make a determination at that point in time of whether that position is needed in that team, needed in that branch, and if not, it goes into this enterprise position pool. We've had over 30 positions go into that pool and get recalibrated, as I indicated, to where the need is most. And most of that need has been identified by the front office. So putting more resources to serve customers, removing some of those resources, or recalibrating, reassigning work more in the back office. So we're, so every position that's open through attrition, we're taking another look at whether it's essential. Is it essential today? Is it essential in 6 months? Along with trying to, keep our PY footprint consistent as we're making these changes. The other is really related to telework. We know that if we can get continued telework in the successful manner, keep it as productive as it has been with our teams, that there is an opportunity for even further savings. So I did make a comment this week that I believe that we'll have half of our employees being able to have some form of remote working post COVID-19, at least 50% of the organization. So what that means is we will be taking a look at every position at CalPERS. The first identification is this a position that could really work full-time from home? We have a team within our IT department, our IT help desk, that has been doing this for a number of years, and it's quite successful there. So how can we take that business model or that workforce planning model and put it into other areas of the business? So that would be the designation of a 1. The designation of a 2 would be, positions and work that really would be more conducive to a part-time telework schedule. And in a part-time situation or arrangement, then likely you would be hoteling with other employees. You would not have a dedicated workstation. So you can see the footprint of CalPERS being able to minimize over the next 2 to 3 years as we get these telework arrangements more complete and in place. And I should say the caveat for number 1, the permanent full-time telework, is that the work has to be measurable. We know that we take money out of the trust fund. We need to show value for every dollar that comes out of the trust fund. So it has to be measurable work in order to be designated as number 1. So the example I gave about the IT help desk, a lot of metrics, a lot of measurements, and if they aren't answering the phones or serving the employees within CalPERS, we're certainly going to hear about that. But the contact center would be an area we would look at. Most of the work in Anthony Sweeney's, the front customer service, they have metrics for every core process. We have targets for performance, we have thresholds that determine, green, yellow, and red. That's all within that operational system that I mentioned earlier. So we're looking at everything. We're looking at what is our workforce plan for the future post COVID-19, and then what can we do within COVID-19 to continue to initiate and gather some savings. But really, it's a structural change for CalPERS, and we're excited about it. We can use technology, we can use innovation, and really think about what do we look like 5 years out? What do we look like 2 years out? So we'll give you a more fulsome update in July. Michael Cohen, our CFO, will be doing that for as one of the sessions.
Thank you, Ms. Frost. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also think, while we're going to be putting these burdens on our CalPERS staff, that the board should also take a look and see what we can do to hold down our costs. I think I mentioned that in, I don't know what committee, one of the committees today, and I hope we can continue to see what we can do to hold down our costs as well. Thank you.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions? I don't see any other questions for you, Ms. Frost, and thank you very much for your presentation. So now we will move to the next item on the agenda, which is action consent items, 6A, B, and C. Do we have a motion?
Move approval.
Moved by Ms. Taylor. Can we get a second? Second by Mr. Fechner. Second by Mr. Fechner. Roll call, Ms. Hopper, please.
Sure. For 6A, 6B, and 6C. Margaret Brown,
You'll mute, Margaret.
Margaret Brown,
Can we separate those out, please?
Which one you want out?
I'm trying to find the agenda. It's open session for today, right?
Yeah, right.
6A.
A is
My-
approval of the minutes. B is board travel, which is none, I guess. And then C is
B
annual
is
review.
not there, Henry.
Huh?
B is not there, so it's just A and C.
Yeah,
Oh, okay. Fine. I don't need to separate it. I didn't know.
okay.
I didn't know that B was there. Thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, roll call, Ms. Hopper.
okay. Margaret Brown,
Aye.
Rob Fechner,
Aye.
Frank Ruffino for Fiona Ma,
Aye.
Lisa Middleton,
Aye.
David Miller,
Aye.
Stacy Oliveris,
Aye.
Michelle Mitchell for Irena Ortega, Jason Perez, Jason Perez,
Aye.
Ramon Mubakava,
Aye.
Teresa Taylor,
Aye.
Shonda Wesley,
Aye.
Lynn Paquin for Betty Yee.
Aye.
Mr. President, again, that was for 6A and 6C.
Right. Right. Okay, thank you. Ms. Brown, I see you, comment, was that the previous? Okay, thank you. Okay, then we'll move that item passes. Now we move to item 7, information consent items. I have no request to remove anything from those items. So we will go to committee reports and actions. And I go to the first committee, investment committee. For that, I call on the chair, Ms. Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee recommends, and I move the board approve the following. Sorry. Agenda item 7A to approve the proposed changes to the total fund investment policy with changes to the private equity investment policy strategy allocation targets as follows. Decrease credit related target to 5% with a range of 0 to 10%. Increase buyout target to 70% with a range of 60 to 80%.
Okay, on the motion of the committee, all those, the roll call, Ms. Hopper.
Margaret Brown,
Aye. Sorry. No, I'm no. Sorry.
okay, Margaret Brown's a no.
No.
Rob Fechner,
Aye.
Frank Ruffino for Fiona Ma,
Aye.
Lisa Middleton,
Aye.
David Miller,
Aye.
Stacy Oliveris,
Aye.
Michelle Mitchell for Irena Ortega, Jason Perez,
Aye.
Ramon Rubacava,
Aye.
Teresa Taylor,
Sorry, aye.
Shonda Wesley,
Aye.
Lynn Paquin for Betty Yee.
Aye.
Mr. President, I have all ayes, 1 no made by Margaret Brown.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hopper. The item passes. Continue on, Ms. Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. The committee received reports on the following topics: a review of the market conditions, capital market assumptions, asset segments, and market valuations as part of the mid-cycle asset liability management process. Wilshire Associates annual reporting company comparing CalPERS to other large public funds, a report on CalPERS investment strategy on climate change. The chair directed staff to do the following. I don't know who's on, but you're rustling paper. Maybe Henry?
Yeah.
The chair directed staff to do the following. Examine the impact of climate change may have on pandemic risk and the potential increase in healthcare liabilities that may result from an increased risk. The committee heard public comment on the following topics: investment strategy and risks, investment policy. And at this time, I would like to share highlights of what to expect at the September Investment Committee meeting. The CalPERS Trust Level Review and the survey results of the Board Investment Consultants' performance. And the next meeting of the Investment Committee is scheduled for September 14th, 2020 in Sacramento, California. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. The next item is the Pension and Health Benefits Committee. For that, I call on the chair, Mr. Fechner.
Thank you, Mr. President. Pension and Health Benefits Committee, PHBC, met on June 16, 2020. The committee recommends and I move the board approve the following. Agenda item 6A, the addition of the Sharp Medicare Advantage Plan, service area changes for Anthem Blue Cross Select Medicare Advantage and Blue Shield of California Trio, and benefit design changes for Kaiser Permanente Senior Advantage and United Healthcare Group Medicare Advantage for the 2021 plan year.
On the motion of the committee, roll call, Ms. Hopper.
Margaret Brown,
Aye.
Rob Fechner,
Aye.
Frank Ruffino for Fiona Ma,
Aye.
Lisa Middleton,
Aye.
David Miller,
Aye.
Stacy Oliveris,
Aye.
Michelle Mitchell for Irena Ortega, Jason Perez,
Aye.
Ramon Rubacava,
Aye.
Teresa Taylor,
Aye.
Shonda Wesley,
Aye.
Lynn Paquin for Betty Yee.
Aye.
All ayes, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hopper. Continue, Mr. Fechner.
Thank you. The committee received reports on the following topics. The committee received information regarding the 2021 Preliminary Health Maintenance Organization and Preferred Provider Organization health plan rates and the challenges and changes facing the long-term care program. The committee received public comment regarding the appreciation of a thorough presentation and transparency of information and concerns regarding an increase in long-term care rates. The chair directed staff to temporarily suspend new long-term care policies and extend COVID-19 cost sharing through December 2020. At this time, I would like to share some highlights of what to expect at the September PHBC meeting. Final HMO and PPO health plan rates will be approved at the July Board of Administration offsite. The committee will review proposed revisions to the PHBC delegation and the CalPERS long-term care program competitive strategy. The committee will also receive an update on mental health, prescription drug spending, and the PPO health plan assessment. The next meeting of the PHBC is scheduled for September 15th, 2020 in Sacramento, California. That ends my report, Mr. President.
Committee meeting, thank you. So there was no Finance and Administration Committee meeting, so we moved to Performance, Compensation, and Talent Management Committee. For that, I call on the chair, Mr. Fechner.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Performance, Compensation, and Talent Management Committee met on June 16, 2020. The committee recommends and I move the board approve the following. Agenda item 6A, annual review 2020-2021 incentive metrics. Approve the fiscal year 2020 to 21 incentive metrics. You're muted, Mr. President.
Go ahead. We'll take them both together, Mr. Fechner.
Very
Separate.
good.
Unless someone asks for a separation. Okay, that's okay, then we won't take them together. Ms. Hopper, roll call, please, on item 6A.
Margaret Brown,
I'd like to propose an alternate motion.
There's a second?
Mr. Jones? No, I have to give you my motion. Thank you. Correct?
Yeah.
Thank you.
If we get a second.
Yeah, I'd like to send this incentive metric plan back based on public comment. I'd like to have us include something on healthcare in the incentive metrics. I also think they're a little bit confusing, so I'd like to send this back to the committee and not approve it at this time, so we can take a look at having a healthcare metric in there. Thank you.
So is there a second on Ms. Brown's motion? Is there a second on Ms. Brown's motion? The motion failed for lack of second. So proceed, Ms. Hopper.
Margaret Brown,
No.
Rob Fechner,
Aye.
Frank Ruffino for Fiona Ma,
Aye.
Lisa Middleton,
Aye.
David Miller,
Aye.
Stacy Oliveris,
Aye.
Michelle Mitchell for Irena Ortega,
Aye.
Jason Perez,
Aye.
Ramon Rubacava,
Aye.
Teresa Taylor,
Aye.
Shonda Wesley,
Aye.
Lynn Paquin for Betty Yee.
Aye.
Mr. President, I have 11 ayes, 1 no made by Margaret Brown.
Okay, the item passes. Okay, so continue on, Mr. Fechner.
Thank you. Agenda item 6B, 2020 to 2021 Incentive Plan of the Chief Investment or Executive Officer. Approve the fiscal year 2020 to 2021 Incentive Plan for the CEO.
On the motion of the committee, roll call, Ms. Hopper.
Item 6B, Margaret Brown,
No.
Rob Fechner,
Aye.
Frank Ruffino for Fiona Ma,
Aye.
Lisa Middleton,
Aye.
David Miller,
Aye.
Stacy Oliveris,
Aye.
Michelle Mitchell for Irena Ortega,
Aye.
Jason Perez,
Aye.
Ramon Rubacava,
Aye.
Teresa Taylor,
Aye.
Shonda Wesley,
Aye.
Lynn Paquin for Betty Yee.
Aye.
Mr. President, 11 ayes, 1 no made by Margaret Brown.
Okay, thank you. Continue on, Mr. Fechner.
Thank you. The committee heard public comment on the following topics: metrics and incentives. The chair directed staff to provide information to the committee regarding how base pay was determined to calculate incentive awards when furloughs were in effect. Provide information to the committee regarding the reference to other methods in the customer service incentive metric. Provide information to the committee regarding the survey questions utilized in the customer service incentive metrics. Work with a consultant to review the enterprise operational effectiveness metric. At this time, I would like to share some highlights of what to expect at the September Performance Compensation and Talent Management Committee meeting. The committee will conduct the annual performance review of the Chief Executive Officer. The committee will receive information on the inclusion of the Chief Investment Officer position in the long-term care incentive program, the long-term incentive program. The committee will hear the finalist selection by the subcommittee for the board's primary executive and investment consultant compensation consultant request for proposal. The next meeting of the Performance Compensation Talent Management Committee is scheduled for September 15, 2020 in Sacramento, California. Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fechner. We need to go back because we had a request from the public to speak on, I think it's 8A. Mr. Fox?
8B.
8B? Okay, so someone said that 8A also was a request. So I'll refer to you, Mr. Fox, on who's waiting to speak on what.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On item 8B, the first commenter is Amy Valdez.
Hello, Mr. Chairman and members of the CalPERS Board. My name is Amy Valdez, and each year the CalPERS Board negotiates our healthcare premiums that we pay for the upcoming year. The premiums have been rising so much faster than the CPI. And over the past 2 years, we've been in conversation with our members at Local 1000 as all about the process. And we've heard from a lot of members, over 600 stories about how they suffer from economic security and rising costs of healthcare. I'm speaking today to request that you continue negotiating with healthcare companies to find a way to keep cost increases to a minimum. Right now, state workers are being asked to reduce our compensation by up to 10%, and healthcare companies should be looking at reducing their overall insurance rates by a significant amount both to help state workers and to help the state of California. I know last time we were furloughed, I had to make choices on what therapies my son with autism would have because of the copays. And it came down to a choice of food on the table versus all of the therapies he should have to maintain, or what could we continue to do to keep him going. And as a strong member-led union at Local 1000, we're standing up to say, don't raise our rates. We join all the workers of California that are fighting back against these out-of-control increases in our healthcare premiums while the CEOs are earning millions of dollars. Thank you very much for the time.
Okay. Mr. Fox, are there any other public to speak on any of the items we missed, that we passed?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we have a couple more on 8B. The next caller is Al Darby.
Al Darby, RPEA. Mr. Chair, Committee, Board, I should say. While the preliminary rates that are proposed this time around are more realistic than in the past, excess profits recently reported by insurers strongly suggest that better rates are attainable. Always in the past, insurers were urged to come back with lower final rates after the preliminary rates were issued the month before. I believe this is still an appropriate practice given the new high profit information we've just received. Thank you, Al Darby.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Fox.
Mr. Chair, the next caller, not sure about the pronunciation here, Dev Berger.
Good afternoon. This is Deb Berger, and I'm a retiree. Yesterday during the PHBC meeting, it was reported that in light of the budget deficit, that Blue Shield, Sharp, and Western Health Advantage are going to provide CalPERS with concessions. But the question is, why is the health plan that has the largest CalPERS membership at 45%, that being Kaiser, and also has a massive cash reserve of $37 billion, of which $25 billion is cash, is not making any concessions? It seems questionable that with such a massive reserve from huge profits, that Kaiser should at least tell CalPERS members and the board why they're not making any concessions. And so that is what I'm respectfully requesting, that the staff and the board get a formal response on why Kaiser is not making any concessions. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. And I think at our July meetings, staff could be prepared to expound upon that comment. Anyone else? Mr. Fox.
Mr. Chair, we have one more commenter on item 8B, Bobby Roy.
Hello, Mr. Chair and members of the Board of Administration. My name is Bobby Roy. I am a member leader in SEIU Local 1000. I am speaking today to request that you continue negotiating with the healthcare companies to find a way to keep cost increases to a minimum. SEIU, as we continue to meet with our members and speak with them about the process of the board annually negotiating the healthcare premiums that we pay for the upcoming year, we hear hundreds of stories that members are suffering from economic insecurity as well as the rising cost of healthcare. One of those stories is of my godchild, who was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at the age of 2. They are 14 now, and for them, health insurance has not just been a benefit, it has been and continues to be a lifeline. We see and feel the rising healthcare premiums, and increases in healthcare premiums also cost the state hundreds of millions of dollars. California is facing a $54 billion budget deficit. State workers like myself are being asked to reduce our compensation by up to 10%. Yet health insurance companies have to look at reducing their overall insurance rates by a significant amount to help both. All should give some, none should give all. SAIU stands to say don't raise our rates. We join with all California workers to fight back against out-of-control health insurance increases while these CEOs are earning millions of dollars. Our working families deserve to be provided every opportunity to have quality, affordable health care. And we stand with you and we stand together, CalPERS and Local 1000, because we have the capability to have a profound effect on the entire state and keep increases to a minimum. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, and I just want to indicate that the board and staff continue to pursue any vehicle or mechanism we can to keep those rates down as much as possible. So we are certainly in that camp also. Mr. Fox.
That concludes public comment on item 8B, Mr. Chair.
Okay, then I missed Miss Oliveras on 8. Was it 8A, Miss Oliveras? Okay, Miss Oliveras.
You got my reminders. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I wanted to thank you, Mr. President, and I wanted to thank you, Ms. Vice President, and then also Ms. Frost for your comments earlier. As we really think through the current events and past events, I'm sure we're all aware that much of our global capital markets are predicated on institutional racism. We look at how our market started, that's where it began. So diversity and inclusion isn't enough. It's a start, but it's not enough. We need to work with our global partners to reimagine the structure of our capital system. As investment firms reevaluate how they do business, CalPERS must do so as well. And I look forward to discussing this more in our July meeting and our September meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments, Ms. Oliver. Okay, so that's I think I covered Miss Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. I wanted to thank our commenters on 8B. And Mr. Jones, thank you for following those comments as well. I just wanted to make sure that we continue to ask staff, Mr. Molds, Ms. Frost, to continue to look at ways that we can leverage those companies to bring those costs down. I don't think it was well explained about what those costs benefits they were going to give us in terms of percentages or anything like that. Some of it was, some of it wasn't. But in any event, I feel everybody's paying what they're talking about, especially when it hits the news that the insurance carriers are taking home, the CEOs are taking home millions of dollars, and the hospital, our providers were bailed out, and they're paying their CEOs with that bailout money. So I think it's very important we figure out a way, because we're not going to be the only ones as state workers that get a 10% pay cut. I can guarantee you there is going to be furloughs throughout our counties and cities too. So we need to really evaluate how we can get them to take a haircut too, rather than just the employees, because it hurts the state of California. Ultimately, they pay parts of our premiums, a large portion of our premiums. So it's important that they give it give the premium cut as a whole premium cut, not just an administrative fee cut. So I'm asking that we look into how we can do that. Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Perez, did you want to comment on 8D?
Yes, please.
Okay, Mr. Perez.
That's the compensation and the incentive package. It would be great if eventually, when we can continue looking forward now, compensating our team members who work their tail off and they're doing a fantastic job. If we can maybe look at increasing their base salary as opposed to a higher incentive. I've said it before, and it's true today, you get what you pay for. So let's increase their base and keep them here. And maybe we can remember that for next time. Pretty please.
Okay, thank you. And the chair of the performance and comp, Mr. Fechner, you heard that. So as we go forward with your future meetings, take into consideration Mr. Perez's comment. Okay, thank you. We now will move to, we have public request to speak on 8E, which is the one coming up, which is the Risk and Audit Committee. So what, Mr. Fox, do we have someone to speak on this before we take action?
Mr. President,
Mr. Chair,
Mr. President, I think you have Ms. Middleton, who also wishes to speak or make comment.
Okay, yes, I see that now. Ms. Middleton and yes, Ms. Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to second the comments of Mr. Perez. I believe as a public employer, admittedly a unique public employer, our compensation packages should be weighted towards salary, not towards performance bonuses.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and for the board members' purpose is that I do have a request to separate Mr. Miller items 6A and 6B, so we will be voting on those separately. So, but back to Mr. Fox. Do you have a public comment request on this one, Mr. Fox?
Mr. Chair, not on E. We have comments for 8F.
Okay, all righty. Okay, Mr. Miller, we will now call on you for the Risk and Audit Committee as the chair for your report.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Risk and Audit Committee met on June 17th, 2020. The committee recommends and I move the board approve the following, and we'll take these separately. So the first one is Agenda Item 6A, the 2020 to 2021 Office of Audit Services Plan. And the motion is to approve the 2020 to 2021 Office of Audit Services Plan. And so I'll ask Ms. Hopper to
Ms. Hopper, okay. On the motion of the committee, Ms. Hopper, please.
Margaret Brown.
I'd like to propose a substitute motion. That motion is that we approve the audit plan with the amendment to include the audits on consent closed session.
Okay, it's been moved and moved by Ms. Brown, second by Mr. Perez to include additional information. I'll have you restate that, Ms.
Yes, to include the audit reports on consent closed session.
Okay, we'll take a vote on that. First, Ms. Hopper, would you please call the roll on that substitute motion?
Okay, Margaret Brown.
Aye.
Rob Fechner.
Aye.
Frank Ruffino for Fiona Ma.
Aye.
Lisa Middleton.
No.
David Miller.
no.
Stacy Oliveris.
Aye.
Michelle Mitchell for Irena Ortega. Aye. Jason Perez.
Aye.
Ramon Rubalcava.
Yes.
Teresa Taylor.
Aye.
Shonda Wesley.
Aye.
Lynn Packler for Betty Yee.
Aye.
Mr. President, on the subsequent motion from Margaret Brown, seconded by Jason Perez, I have 10 ayes, 2 noes. First no was Lisa Middleton. Second no was David Miller.
So the substitute motion passes. So thank you for that. We now move to, you got that clear, Ms. Frost, what that substitute motion is? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Then we go to item 6B, Mr. Miller.
Oh, don't we have to? Okay. So item 6B, the independent auditor's annual plan. The motion is to approve the independent auditor's annual plan.
On the motion of the committee, Ms. Hopper, please.
Margaret Brown,
Aye.
Rob Peckner,
Aye.
Frank Ruffino for Fiona Ma,
Aye.
Lisa Middleton,
Aye.
David Miller,
Aye.
Stacy Oliveris,
Aye.
Michelle Mitchell for Irena Ortega, Jason Perez,
Aye.
Ramon Rubacava,
Aye.
Teresa Taylor,
Aye.
Shonda Wesley,
Aye.
Lynn Paquin for Betty Yee.
Aye.
Mr. President, I have 12 ayes.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hopper. Okay, continue, Mr. Miller.
The committee received reports on the following topics: Enterprise Compliance Activity Status Report and the 2019 through 2020 Annual Compliance Report. The chair directed staff to prepare for the committee at the next closed session meeting an information item regarding the provision of additional information on substantiated ethics helpline complaints. At this time, I would like to share some highlights of what to expect at the November Risk and Audit Committee meeting. The Independent Auditor's Report for fiscal years 2019 through 2020, the review of the Independent Auditor's Management Letter, the selection of the Independent Financial Statement Auditor, the third-party valuation and certification of the 2019 annual valuations of the Judges Retirement System, Judges Retirement System 2, Legislators Retirement System, and the 1959 Survivor Benefit Program, and finally, the Enterprise Risk Management Framework Review. The next meeting of the Risk and Audit Committee is scheduled for November 18th, 2020 in Sacramento, California. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Ms. Brown, you just have comment. Are you asking for a comment now or that was previous? Okay, thank you. Okay, so we now go to item 8F, and I understand we do have public comment on 8F. Mr. Fox.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we have one individual for comment, Mr. Tim Behrens.
President Jones, I was wondering if you could read the final action item because it wasn't finished during your committee this morning.
Okay. Approve and adopt the proposed changes to the board travel policy as presented in the agenda item with the following exception. On page 2 of attachment 1, replace the words approved by with the words 2 weeks prior notice to, so that the full paragraph reads as follows. Board member travel within California and attendance at any event within California with a registration fee less than $500 requires 2 weeks prior notice to the board president or in his or her absence in cases involving the board president's in-state or attendance at an event, the vice president.
Mr. President, if I could, there was a correction to what you just read.
Yeah.
I do have the correction if I could read.
Okay, okay, please, okay.
Thank you. Approve agenda item 5A, approve and adopt the proposed changes to the board travel policy as presented in the agenda item with the following exception. On page 2 of attachment 1, replace the words approved by with the words 2 weeks prior notice, if possible, with an explanation when it is not possible to do so. And now the full paragraph reads, board member travel within California and attendance at any event within California with a registration fee of less than $500 requires 2 weeks prior notice, if possible, with an explanation when it is not possible to the board president or in his/her absence, and in cases involving the board's president's in-state travel or attendance, the vice president. Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Milton. Mr. Burns?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank the committee for a lively debate and a reasonable conclusion that will continue to allow board members to attend CSR chapter meetings throughout the state. I appreciate that, and I urge a yes vote. Thank you.
Okay. So now we will go back to Ms. Milton, for the Board Governance Committee. I asked Ms. Milton as the Vice Chair of the Board Governance Committee to now make the motion.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. President. The Board Governance Committee met on June 17, 2020. The committee recommends, and I move, the board approve the following. Agenda item 4B, approve the current CEO delegation resolution as presented in the agenda item.
On the motion of the committee, Mrs. Hopper, please.
Margaret Brown,
No.
Rob Fechner,
Aye.
Frank Ruffino for Fiona Ma,
Aye.
Lisa Middleton,
Aye.
David Miller,
Aye.
Stacy Oliveris,
Aye.
Michelle Mitchell for Irena Ortega, Jason Perez,
Aye.
Ramon Rubalcava,
Aye.
Teresa Taylor,
Aye.
Shonda Wesley,
Aye.
Lynn Paquin for Betty Yee.
Abstain.
Mr. President, I have 10 aye votes, 1 no vote by Margaret Brown, 1 abstain vote by Lynn Paquin for Betty Yee.
Thank you, Ms. Hopper. The item passes. Ms. Middleton.
Okay. Mr. President, is it your pleasure that I read agenda item 5A again?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Agenda item 5A, approve and adopt the proposed changes to the board travel policy as presented in the agenda item with the following exception. On page 2 of attachment 1, replace the words approved by with the words 2 weeks prior notice, if possible, with an explanation when it is not possible to do so that the full paragraph now reads, board member travel within California and attendance at any event within California with a registration fee less than $500 requires 2 weeks prior notice if possible, with an explanation when it is not possible to the board president or in his/her absence, and in cases involving the president's in-state attendance at an event, the vice president. Thank you, Mr.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Middleton. On the motion of the committee, Mrs. Hopper, please.
Margaret Brown,
No.
Rob Fechner,
Aye.
Frank Ruffino for Fiona Ma,
Aye.
Lisa Middleton,
Aye.
David Miller,
Aye.
Stacy Oliveris,
No.
Michelle Mitchell for Irena Ortega, Michelle, was that an aye?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Jason Perez,
No.
Ramon Rubalcava,
Aye.
Teresa, 3 noes. First no, Margaret Brown. Second no, Stacy Oliveris. Last no, Jason Perez.
Thank you, Ms. Hopper. Continue, Ms. Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. President. The next meeting of the Board Governance Committee is tentatively scheduled for September 16, 2020 in Sacramento, California. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Fox, are there any other members of the public wishing to speak on these items before we move on?
No, Mr. Chair. The only two remaining items are 9C and 10A.
Okay, 9C. Okay. Okay, very good. Okay, now we'll move to the next item, action agenda items, proposed decisions of administrative law judges. And I want to, first of all, ask if Mr. Sharad Shah, is he on the phone, Ms. Hopper?
Yes, Chirag should be able to share his audio.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Okay, thank you, Mr. Shah. Okay, so then we have a request to separate, before I call on you, Ms. Taylor, we have a request to separate 9A2 and vote on that separately. So when you make your motion, would you take that one out and take a separate motion on that? Ms. Taylor, I asked the Vice President to read the motion on this, please.
Sure, thank you, Mr. President. So catch me if I do this wrong, because I might just read it anyway. I move to adopt the proposed decisions at agenda items 9A1, 9A through 9 as the board's own decision with the minor modifications argued by staff to agenda items 9A5 and 6. 9A2 will be pulled.
Okay, we need a second on this.
Seconded.
Second by Mr. Miller. Mrs. Hopper.
Margaret Brown,
Aye.
Rob Fechner,
Aye.
Frank Ruffino for Fiona Ma,
Aye.
Lisa Middleton,
Aye.
David Miller,
Aye.
Stacy Oliveris,
Aye.
Michelle Mitchell for Irena Ortega, Jason Perez,
Aye.
Ramon Rubacava,
Aye.
Teresa Taylor,
Aye.
Shonda Wesley,
Aye.
Lynn Packford for Betty Yee, Lynn.
Aye.
Mr. President, that is 12 ayes. And if you could reiterate, the motion is at 9A1 through 9A9.
No, ma'am.
No.
Listen, it's 9A1, comma, 3 through 9,
3 through 9.
with a minor modification argued by staff to agenda item 9A5 and 6, with 9A2 pulled.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
you're welcome. Now we will go to 9A2, Ms. Taylor.
Yes, I would like to move to adopt the proposed decision at agenda item 9A2 with the minor modification argued by staff to the agenda item 9A2. And I need a second, and then I guess we can discuss it.
Okay. Do we have a second? Ms. Brown, is that you?
Second.
Okay,
Second,
Ms.
sorry.
Brown. That's okay, Ms. Brown. Okay, so comment, Ms. Michelle, is this your request?
Yes, I'm just going to abstain from voting on this one.
Okay.
Can you hear her?
Yeah, she said she's abstaining.
Oh, okay. Okay, so then we could go ahead and it's been moved and was it second by someone?
Yeah, Margaret.
Margaret, that's right. Okay. Okay, so Ms. Hopper on the motion.
Do we have any discussion on this since it was pulled?
She just said that she wants to abstain.
Oh,
she
is
didn't
that
want
why
to-
we pulled it? Okay,
Yeah.
okay, got it.
Margaret
Ms.
Brown,
Aye.
Rob Fechner,
Aye.
Frank Ruffino for Fiona Ma,
Aye.
Lisa Middleton,
Aye.
David Miller,
Aye.
Stacy Oliveris,
Aye.
Michelle Mitchell for Irena Ortega,
Abstain.
Jason Perez,
Aye.
Ramon Rubacava,
Aye.
Teresa Taylor,
Aye.
Shonda Wesley,
Aye.
Lynn Packman for Betty E.
Aye.
Mr. President, that is on 9A2, made by Teresa Taylor, seconded by Margaret Brown.
Okay, thank you very much. So now we would ask Ms. Taylor to make a motion on 9B, petitions for reconsideration.
Perfect. So I move to deny the petition for reconsideration at agenda items 9B1 through 3.
Do we have
I'll
a second?
second it.
Second by Mr. Miller. Mrs. Hopper, please.
Margaret Brown,
Aye.
Rob Fechner,
Aye.
Frank Ruffino for Fiona Ma,
Aye.
Lisa Middleton,
Aye.
David Miller,
Aye.
Stacy Oliveris,
Aye.
Michelle Mitchell for Reina Ortega,
Aye.
Jason Perez,
Aye.
Ramon Rubacava,
Aye.
Teresa Taylor,
Aye.
Shonda Wesley,
You're on mute, Shonda.
Aye.
Lynn Packman for Betty E.
Aye.
Mr. President, 12 ayes.
Thank you, Ms. Hopper. Okay, thank you, Mr. Shar, for your time, and stay safe.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. All right, we now will move to item 9C, and this is that Mr. Brown. Is that Danny Brown? Assembly Bill 2365.
Danny, you should be able to share your audio and video.
All right. There I am. Good morning, or I should say good afternoon, Mr. President and board members. Danny Brown, CalPERS team member. This item is an action item asking for board to adopt a support position on Assembly Bill 2365, authored by Assembly Member Rodriguez. This bill removes the requirement to reinstate a retired member for violations of the working after retirement laws, while still allowing reinstatement if circumstances warrant it. As noted in the board item, this change in law would provide the opportunity to resolve these violations more efficiently. Rather than reinstatement, retirees could pay penalties consistent with the amount of time worked in violation. We believe a support position is consistent with our strategic goal of reducing complexity and our overall focus on reducing administrative costs. The bill does not change the rules and requirements for retired members who work after retirement, such as the 960-hour rule, 180-day sit-out requirement, or requirements related to pay rate. This bill has already been passed by the Assembly on its consent calendar and is awaiting action in the Senate. With that, I'll stop and answer any questions you may have.
Yeah, Ms. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. I would just like to urge my fellow board members to support AB 2365. When we initially saw the employer audit report that talked about this working after retirement, it was pretty shocking, not only the number, but that there was a lot of repetition in certain agencies. I actually heard from quite a few school district folk who had these violations, and a lot of it just stemmed from turnover in payroll and not getting the information out to the employees. And so I'm really thankful that we have this solution that financially CalPERS will be made whole, the PERF will be made whole, and that's the most important thing, without doing undue hardship to our members. Thank you.
Okay, this is an action item. Any other comments by the board?
I so move.
Okay, moved by Mr. Fechner and second by
Brown.
Ms. Brown. Okay, we do have public comment request on this item. So, Mr. Fox.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we have one caller, Deb Jenkins.
Hello, this is Deb Jackins with California School Employees Association.
and I ask for your support on this bill. This bill is a great example of when a group representing retirees works with CalPERS staff on a fix to a problem that negatively affects retirees. Retirees given bad information from employers that caused them to make errors on the number of hours that they worked. Retirees forced to look to refinance or sell their homes to pay back the funds owed to CalPERS, made unreasonable not by CalPERS but by the law. This bill will give relief to those retirees, many which are our retired members and California school employees. Marcy Frost brought this issue to California school employees. Marcy, you wanted us to move more quickly than we were able to, but we did move, and we put together AB 2365. It's a bill that goes over each department at CalPERS for a fix with no negative impact to the fund. A bill that was able to stay alive even during these COVID times when they were only taking up limited number of bills. I'd like to thank all the CalPERS staff who helped, Danny Brown, Kelly Fox, Brad Hansen, Anthony Sweeney, and especially Renee Ostrander. This bill is why we do the work we do. Please support AB 2365. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Fox. Anybody else?
Mr. Chair, that concludes public comments on item 9C.
Okay, so Ms. Hopper, please.
Margaret Brown,
Aye.
Rob Fechner,
Aye.
Frank Ruffino for Fiona Ma,
Aye.
Lisa Middleton,
Aye.
David Miller,
Aye.
Stacy Oliveris,
Aye.
Michelle Mitchell for Irena Ortega, Jason Perez,
Aye.
Ramon Rubacava,
Aye.
Teresa Taylor,
Aye.
Shonda Wesley,
Aye.
Lynn Paquin for Betty Yee.
Aye.
Mr. President, that's 12 ayes for item 9C.
Thank you, Ms. Hopper. Okay, now we will go to information agenda items 10A, state and federal legislation update. Mr. Brown.
Yep. Good afternoon noon again, Mr. President and board members. I know it's probably been a long 3 days, so I will try to be brief and just touch on a couple items on the state side as well as the federal side. On the state side, you know that the House, or I should say the legislature, passed a budget on Monday to meet their constitutional deadline. However, they're still in negotiations with the governor. We over a few items, so we will continue to monitor that progress. We're still waiting for trailer bills to come out. A couple of those trailer bills have to do with CalPERS and the supplemental, repurposing the supplemental funds that the administration provided us last year. So again, they're in agreement around the contributions to CalPERS, but they just haven't passed the legislation to enact or effectuate that agreement. So we'll continue to monitor that and keep you posted as that comes about. As far as our two sponsored bills, both of them have passed out of the assembly. On our private loan disclosure bill, AB 2473, that was amended. The amendments were included into your in-board item. Those amendments went into print on June 3rd, and those are a result of negotiations with the California News Publishers Association, who are neutral on the bill. As a brief summary, these amendments clarify the exemption for constituent owners of a borrower, narrow the provision related to creditors' committees, provide additional disclosure about the amount of money a borrower has paid on a loan, and then provides additional disclosure about whether a loan has been in default for more than 6 months. So both of our bills are now in the Senate. We're hopeful that they will move through the Senate, but the Senate has been a little bit more strict about what bills they hear. But we will be pushing to have both of our bills move through. The legislature is finishing up their House of Origin right now. Assuming they get the budget completed, they'll take a short summer recess, come back on July 13th to finish out the second house, bills in the second house, and that will conclude on August 31st. On the federal side, I guess I'll just start by, since our last meeting, we did submit a comment letter to the SEC objecting to a proposed rule entitled Management's Discussion and Analysis, Selected Financial Data, and Supplementary Financial Information. At a very high level, the proposed rule eliminates disclosures of basic information upon which investors like CalPERS rely on to make investment and governance decisions. A copy of this letter can be found on our website. And then, since I know that state and federal aid, or I should say federal aid to state and local governments is on the top of everybody's mind, we are continuing to monitor the action by Congress on the fourth stimulus bill and working with our federal representative and other associations to engage as needed. Although the House did pass a $3 trillion package in the middle of May, the administration and the Senate were not quick to take any action. They continue to wait to see how the third stimulus bill plays out, as well as the reopening of the economy. Senator McConnell, though, has now indicated that he's ready to take up a fourth bill probably sometime in July. The dollar amount is still in flux. We know the House, as I mentioned, passed a $3 trillion bill. The Trump administration recently came out and said they're willing to spend up to $2 trillion, but Senator McConnell is still at the $1 trillion amount. So we'll continue to monitor that. We do believe, I think there is encouraging news that there is bipartisan support for some type of federal aid to state and local governments, despite what you read in the papers about the rhetoric between blue state versus red state spending. So I think behind the scenes, they're building support for some kind of aid, but we'll just have to wait to see how much and when that happens. And with that, I'll stop there and answer any questions you might have on the state or federal legislation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brown. Ms. Wesley.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Brown, for your report. There's something that it's not a question, just a comment I wanted to open up to the board about. In the Central Coast, there is an issue with two fire districts who are attempting to consolidate. Good governance, achieving economies of scale for that community. And the labor and management have reached an agreement on what the structure should look like. There's a perceived issue that CalPERS has that the staff has graciously been helping resolve, but it does look like it's going to require legislation. So Assemblymember Stone is authoring that bill, and the language, I think, is done or close to done. And so when we meet again in another month, I wanted to ask your indulgence for that bill to come before you to hopefully get the support of the board in the consolidation. This is exactly the kind of thing that CalPERS should be helping our members with in order to facilitate. And so I've asked Marcy to help get that on the agenda for our next meeting to hopefully take a position. So I wanted to thank Marcy and Danny, and also Kelly and others on the staff who have been helping to navigate the waters here, and hope that we can make this bill that CalPERS can put their name on. So that will be forthcoming.
Okay, so that could be a discussion for the next meeting, Ms. Frost. Okay. Ms. Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Mr. Brown, thank you for your report. I just had a question on the Federal Heroes Act, and you said we are monitoring it. Are we engaging with anybody? Obviously, Congress already passed their bill. Are we engaging with the Senate? Because we do have an interest in this, so I would think as CalPERS we might engage.
Well, we are engaged. We are engaging with the Senate, particularly more so probably on some of the health-related items and through our associations. The HEROES Act was dead in the water. The Senate is not going to take it up, but they are negotiating components of it or pieces of it. So some of the things that we feel could be helpful, we're working with the Healthcare Roundtable, NCHC, others to try to see if we can get some of those components into whatever the final package may be.
So you've already thrown in the towel for what the Senate wants to do rather than pressuring them to do better.
I'm not saying we're throwing in the towel, but I guess we're concentrating on the things that are, I think important to Cal, or we at least identified as the most important for CalPERS, and particularly for the health area. Obviously, um, there isn't a lot of the stuff in there around a lot of the House and financial services items did not make it into the bill, and they possibly are going to do a separate bill later on.
Okay, so you're saying any pension issues or relief for our localities didn't make it in or anything like that?
Well, there is federal aid, about $875 billion in federal aid to state and local governments in the HEROES Act. I think it's more of we are taking a behind the scenes type of push on federal aid just because it's so political and around public pension funds and red state versus state.
I disagree. I think I don't think. I mean, if we don't talk about pensions, I know that's what the Senate wants to make clear, right? But if we don't talk about pensions, if we don't back, and I don't know how the rest of my fellow board members feel, I don't know how Ms. Frost feels, but if we don't back that $875 billion for state and localities, we're looking at a prolonged recovery. And that hurts all of us. That doesn't just hurt, a few people. That is the entire state of California, all the localities. That could lay off our police officers, while we're having these conversations, or our firefighters. That could lay off state workers. That impacts the pension fund in and of itself because you're taking money away from the pension fund. So I have a real problem that we're picking and choosing, and we're not, and we've thrown in the towel that $875 billion isn't something that CalPERS should be behind. I will encourage our members who are listening to this to call their legislators, especially their senators. But in addition, I think CalPERS should have a voice.
I think it's also, and I guess what I maybe meant to say is it's more of a public versus private push as far as how we're dealing with some of those issues, at least in working through some of the other public pension system, public pension associations like NASR and NCPERS and NCTR.
Well, that's fine as long as we're making the push and we're not just ignoring it.
I mean, it is noted, and we will take that advice and direction from the board, obviously, on this issue.
I don't know who else agrees with me, but I feel that it's very important because you're impacting. I got a raised hand there, but you are impacted by not pushing that portion of it. You're impacting the pension just because people are not paying into the pension because they're being laid off. So I think it's really important that we take a holistic view from the state of California and the economic recovery. How long did it take us to crawl out of 2008? And we have an opportunity right now to pressure the Senate. And how we do that, I don't know. If you want to do that with other organizations, that is fine. But CalPERS does have an outsized voice, and I think it's important we use it. And I hope that my fellow board members feel the same.
Yeah, Ms. Taylor, I hear what you're saying, and the strategy we're using, as Mr. Brown has indicated, is that it's not more, but it's both public as well as private, working through other institutions, CalPERS on its own. We need other people saying the same thing that we're saying. Sometimes it makes sense to use CalPERS in our individual voice. We believe on this particular matter that it is better for us to pair up with other pension funds. And we have to take into consideration all of the dynamics around this particular bill. I know I've been directly engaged on this. I absolutely agree with you that this is really important, that this is helping public employers, municipalities. At the same time, you're helping to do bailouts of airlines is really important, that we're talking about Main Street individuals, pensioners, if you will, who had no fault. There was no fault of theirs that this economic downturn happened, this financial crisis happened, this health crisis happened. So we should be given fair and equal way to any kind of money, any kind of stimulus money that would be made. So our approach has been both public and private, but we do think that we're stronger with multiple voices in the pension industry.
Okay, well, I appreciate that from both of you, and I just want to thank you, but also state that I think everyone is tired, especially employees. While everybody else gets bailed out, we take pay cuts, and we get laid off. So I think it's important.
Okay, Ms. Middleton?
I want to thank Mr. Brown, Ms. Frost for the work they're doing, and Ms. Taylor for her comments. What I can tell you from being on the front lines in a municipality is your local cities are being devastated. For cities in particular who are heavily reliant on sales taxes and hotel taxes, the impact has been overwhelming. I talked to very few colleagues in other cities that are not going through the same thing that we are going through. Significant layoffs, frozen positions, individuals on furloughs, early retirements. Even my dog's upset. The impact on local government will continue to be severe. We are looking at maintenance budgets that are being cut. We are looking at streets that will not be paved. This is going to impact the quality of life, and it is going to impact our economy, and we have to have relief along with everyone else. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Oliveris. You're mute.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. My question is about DOL's information letter that was issued on June 3rd. So just for some background, Department of Labor indicated that private equity is not expressly prohibited in 403 plans and 404 ERISA plans. And so defined contribution plans are an $8.9 trillion marketplace, enormous. And so as we struggle to attract the top performing private equity funds, what do we anticipate the impact will be on CalPERS with more competition?
I don't think we've done that type of an analysis yet. I know that just came out as something that we've had a few conversations about, but that's something that we can go and at least I haven't had those conversations. The investment team may be looking at that, but it hasn't trickled down to me yet. So that
would it be possible? Sorry, go ahead. Would it be possible to get more insight on what DOL plans to do in the future? I assume they're going to provide additional guidance on this, but it would be helpful to better understand what the timeline would be.
Yeah, Ms. Oliveris, as you know, the Australian plans have been able to add private equity into their defined contribution plans or superannuation funds for quite some time. I know the system I came from, this is something that they have really been wanting to offer in their hybrid plan, the DC part of their hybrid plan. And I believe that they will now move forward in that capacity, even though that plan was approved as a DB structure, not a DC structure. So, but you're right. I mean, there's going to be more competition around this. The liquidity nature of a DC plan compared to a DB plan. We're long-term hold. I think, you think about the queue of a private equity structure. Hopefully we stay, being that preferred capital provider over time. But I think this is a big change in the landscape for us. We're going to be competing with very large DC structures. So I think we need to spend a little bit of time doing analysis on what we think the competitive environment might look for us right over the next few years.
Thank you both.
Okay, so that's something, Ms. Frost, that you'll come back to the board with that kind of analysis once it's done. Okay. Mr. Rubalcaba.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also want to join with the concern raised by Ms. Taylor, Vice President Taylor, and supported by Ms. Moulton and others public sector agencies, whether they're school districts or cities, municipalities or counties, provide the the social services. They're the backbone of the services of the community. And as Ms. Milton talked firsthand, the loss of sales tax because of the pandemic-related crisis has really devastated public services. Not only the essential workers who are working day in and day out because they can't they don't have the opportunity to telework in many situations because they have to be there providing the services. I think we deserve to be providing the support we can through all our apparatuses and abilities that CalPERS can muster in support of the HEROES Act. So I appreciate Mrs. Farah's comment. So thank you very much. And I too would be interested in the on the private equity, what's happening, because I think what I heard is going to be in the target date funds where they think they can put it in. And I sit on a 457 trust fund on the board, so that was an issue that's going to come up, I'm sure, at that discussion. So thank you.
Okay, I know we have one comment from the public, but before I go to the public, I don't see any other questions from board members. So I have one, Mr.
Yeah, Ms.
Brown.
Wesley.
Where? That's again? Ms. Wesley, you asking again?
No.
Okay,
Okay.
That was earlier. Thanks.
yeah,
Thank
okay. Mr. Brown, is there a statutory number of days the governor has to sign the budget? And if he doesn't, is he subjected to no salary like the legislature is?
Well, he has 12 days from the time he receives it to sign or veto the budget. But I don't think there's no requirement about him getting paid or not getting paid. And if he has to sign it, if he doesn't, I mean, he has to veto it. If he doesn't veto it, then it becomes, I believe it becomes law.
Oh, so that applies to the budget too then, huh? Okay.
Yeah, so he has to, he would have to veto, if he wanted to veto it, he would have to actually veto it within 12 days after it reaches his desk.
Okay. Okay, thank you. We do have a request. Mr. Perez.
Oh, it's just a chat saying before we log off. Hi.
Oh, okay. Okay, we do have a request from the public to speak. Mr. Fox.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have one caller, Mr. Tim Behrens.
Mr. Behrens.
Yes, President Jones, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I want to speak on AB 2473. We've had this bill under watch status since its inception and continues to be on watch status. There are still several issues we have with the bill, even though it's been amended. This bill is the source of the retirement plans funds is deposits made by the state plan participants and members. These are all made under the provisions of state law, and the state and local government contributions are public. Any decisions made with respect to the use of these funds should necessarily be subject to public review in order to ensure accountability to the respective parties, especially the public. I think the source of the retirement plans funding is critical. If we buy a 401k plan privately, transactions could reasonably be kept private outside the jurisdiction of the PRA. Even then, such investments may be covered, at least to some extent, under securities law and regulations pertaining to registered investment firms. So at some point, at least some of the information must be disclosed. Thank you for your time. Have a good day.
Thank you. Okay, is that it, Mr. Brown?
That is it.
Okay, well, Mr. Pacheco, next up, annual stakeholder perception survey results.
President Jones, this is David Takers. Brad Pacheco had to depart due to a family emergency, so I'll be discussing this item for you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, everybody. President Jones, members of the board, I'm David Takearts, CalPERS team member. I'll be presenting to you today a high-level summary of the results of our annual Stakeholder Perception Survey, which is administered in the spring of each year. This is our broadest reaching survey. It casts a net out over the major stakeholder sectors with which we do business, asking for their feedback across a wide array of our efforts in the pension, investment, and healthcare spheres. So let's go ahead and dive into it. Christine, next slide, please. So when we say stakeholders in the Stakeholder Perception Survey, who are we talking about? It's grouped into roughly six rough sectors. We have our active members, we have our retirees, and the little discussed inactive members, folks who have service credit on file with CalPERS but have now left and are working in the private sector. We also have two cuts of employers. We kind of divide our employers by our employer executives or employer senior leaders. These are the city manager, the sort of C-suite leadership of our cities, counties, special districts, schools, and even state agencies. And then we have a broader employers all level. These are folks who subscribe to our employer bulletins. So that could be the city manager, but it's more likely to be the person who's in charge of making sure that when a change comes out to CalPERS, that they're making those changes in their payroll system, that their reporting requirements are being met. So you have an array of levels of rank and file staff and managers there. And then lastly, we have what we would call stakeholder leaders. These are 85 individuals. These are the folks that many of you know by face and name. These are either the executives or the primary advocates and representatives from our retiree, active member, and employer associations. Okay, so these are folks who it's really their job one way or another to know about what's going on at CalPERS, to advocate with CalPERS, to stay informed, and to represent their organization. So we sort of carve them out into a different slice and sample their perception of how CalPERS is doing. You can see the surveys we sent out, over 100,000 surveys. This is a 100% online survey. So we send that out to randomized samples of active members across all of the sectors, so roughly equal between state, public agency, and school members. Again, just a wide swath of those employers and then those 85 top stakeholders. You can see our response rate was a little bit down this year, and I think you'll see that there's a pretty good reason when I tell you about the timing for the survey in this spring, which we'll get to in a moment. Christina, next slide. Real quick note about the survey structure. No change at all to a single word of the survey this year. We try to keep this consistent so that we can have consistent trend reporting for you. There's 8 long-term trend survey questions that are simply yes, no. We have some Likert scale questions where we ask people, do you agree, strongly agree, etc., across an array of issues like ethics, compliance, transparency. We have questions on our effectiveness as an advocate, overall perception, and then we also try to drill down and figure out some demographic questions and ask for their open-ended comments as well. So there's 34 questions in total. It takes less than 5 minutes to fill out. Next slide, please. So we administered this survey March 9th through March 22nd. So the word volatile is perhaps an understatement here. I would challenge anybody to find a more volatile 2-week section of time in the last century than mid-March. This is when peak pandemic fears were reached. During this time period, CalPERS itself closed down, and this is where we sent people home to start working from home. We were seeing just enormously steep declines in global financial markets. This is where most of our employers were, if not considering, actively doing furloughs, layoffs. This is really just the height of the fear surrounded COVID-19 right here. At this time, the CARES Act was just being discussed. There was no economic stimulus. Severe shocks to the state and local economies predicted. And this is when perhaps the top fear of everybody was that the healthcare system would be overwhelmed, leading to some real breakdowns across society. So we definitely did not cherry pick an easy time to send the survey. And we thought that was important. We thought it was important to stick to our schedule and get a sample of what the stakeholder universe was thinking right then in the most challenging time, because we felt that that would help to guide our actions going forward. Next slide. So the results were quite heartening. So despite that volatility, despite the fear, despite the lack of knowing how the story would play out, or that there would be at least even some recovery at all, 85% of people, when asked yes or no, gave a positive yes response across all of our perception surveys. So really, whether they were new employees, retirees, a city manager of a large city, across the board, 85% when push came to shove said yes, our perception of CalPERS is positive. Next slide, please. To highlight some of our key findings, and for this, I want to make sure that I give thanks to our policy research and data analytics team. They're the ones who crunched the numbers and produced this analysis. The key findings for the third year in a row, really our top finding is that customer service scores from members are the strongest corollary to overall positive and favorable opinions about CalPERS, meaning the person who has had positive customer service experience with CalPERS, the person who thinks that CalPERS call center is being managed well, who received good counseling when they picked up the phone or when they came into a regional office or any point of contact with CalPERS, that person tends to also think that CalPERS is doing a great job with balancing the cost and quality of healthcare. They believe that we're doing a good job of managing the risks to the system. They believe that the overall communication is strong. So that continues to be the strongest kind of like emergent property from the analysis is that customer service is such an important factor, which we think is great news because that's something that you can devote resources to and training and focus on, as opposed to trying to get the global financial markets to just cooperate. Customer service is something that we can drill down and focus on, and it continues to be our strength. Kind of moving through this, we did see some lower confidence in retirement contributions being safe, and I'd like to discuss that a little bit more in a second, and a little bit of a dip in the balancing of cost and quality of care. Overall, the stakeholder sector that has the most positive view of CalPERS is our retiree community. Stakeholder leaders, so again, those individuals who many of us know by face and name, have high confidence in the answers that they're getting from CalPERS. We think that's really important. One of our mantras in the Office of Stakeholder Relations where I work is that we're going to get them the information, even if they don't like it, they're going to get it, and they respect that. Of the key stakeholder sectors, those employer senior leaders, so that's the finance director, the city manager, the school, superintendent or chief business official, they're overall the least favorable scores for us. And that's been pretty consistent over time. These are the folks who are dealing with the big picture issues of CalPERS costs. And while they may respect the accuracy of what we're telling them, doesn't mean that they have to like it. But still more positive than negative across all the questions for that group. Christina, next slide, please. So let's dig into it. So let's take a look at the employers here. This is all the employers grouped together, and we're just showing that the overall trend of their answers to some of those key questions. You can see from the green arrows that their scores are up for employers in 7 of these 8 categories. The only one that dipped just a little bit, how well we're doing at keeping their members informed. There's always been a little bit of dissonance with the employers feeling that, right or wrong, they feel that there's a little bit of a rosy message to the members and a grimmer message to them as employers. So this is not too surprising, but it's still a high score overall. And you can see that we're trending upwards. The blue bar across the top is just showing you the average score in recent years. So you can see that really in all of these, we're above our trend line. The only one that kind of hit right on the trend line was that, are you confident that your retirement money is safe, which is the third one in from the right. That one, while it went up last year, it's still lower than the rest. This is certainly, this is consistently the metric that scores the lowest, especially for employers, confidence in retirement money being safe. Next slide, please. So let's take a look at members. Now, this this picture tells a little bit of a conflicted story. The red arrows are showing you that the scores are down from last year. So that's never particularly great, but we think that given the concerns and outright fear permeating the membership, during the 2 weeks that this was open in March due to COVID-19, it's not very surprising. And it's pretty heartening to see that the scores, while down from last year, are still above the average trend in recent years. So a little bit of a dip, but still high, and we think still reasonably good is sort of the story that I believe that we're seeing in this slide. Next one, please. So here again, we're targeting in on those stakeholder leaders, that very core group of folks that, many of whom have publicly commented today and this week. These are the folks that we all know. So it's a smaller group. We don't have as much data on this group. We only started surveying them in this way in the last few years. That's why there's not as many columns. There's just not as much data. And it's a smaller group, so you kind of you'll see more variance from year to year. When there's only 85 people in a group instead of 100,000, you will get a little bit more volatility just in the responses year to year. Nevertheless, we think it's useful. You can see kind of a mixed bag here. We're up pretty significantly in more than half of the categories, or we're down again in the retirement money being safe, and a nice thumbs sideways in keeping touch with their members. But again, over the average trend overall. Next slide, please. Our commitment to stakeholders. So again, this is stakeholders in the broader sense. This is all the folks who have a vested stake in how CalPERS runs and its long-term success. These bullets really represent sort of the mantra of the Office of Stakeholder Relations and the Communications and Stakeholder Relations branch as a whole. So providing access to leadership from Marcy to all the other executives. We do a lot of work making sure that when there's an ask, if at all possible, we try to get Marcy out there, or Michael Cohen, or many of the other execs have done it. You can see our message really, a key one that I want to point out is the third bullet there. One message to all stakeholder groups. I literally say that exact same line at every single meeting because it's true. Whether or not we're talking to employers or retirees or labor or private business, it's just the facts. And we trust that the stakeholder groups will do what they need to do with correct information, which is our pledge that we'll provide to them. Next slide, please. All right, so opportunities and action steps. So we do believe there are several opportunities for us to strengthen our engagement and communication with stakeholders over the next 12 months. We're clear, or we think it's clear that COVID has placed really additional strain on employer budgets. As we just heard from Ms. Middleton and others, we think it'll be important to continue our outreach and provide the tools necessary for them to plan. We held a big webinar for employers in the early stages of COVID-19. We're planning another one in July. We're going to do a lot of outreach on that and explain our returns, our strategies, and what its impacts are on employers. We also want to be supportive where we can. We just heard discussion from Vice President Taylor and others on how we can support legislative efforts to provide relief to the states and specifically local governments. So we're active in that area. And there continues to be uncertainty in those financial markets and the overall economy. So we believe that proactive communication about the steps CalPERS is taking to ensure that long-term sustainability is really critical. So we've shared, our chief investment officer's vision and how we can look to achieve 7%. So we're going to continue to hammer that message to our stakeholders. As you heard Marcy say this morning, we've already transitioned our education events to virtual platforms for both members and employers. So we're not letting the new reality of staying at home and social distancing prevent us from successfully achieving our vision to communicate and stay engaged with these stakeholders and provide that top level service. Next slide, please. Last slide, and I'll wrap up and happy to take questions. So what have we done? What have we done differently in the wake of COVID-19? So as I mentioned, we did a big employer webinar. This was April 9th. We really had to work together as a team across Invo, Acto. Marcy personally participated in the webinar. Fino, our customer service team, we did a webinar with 1,800 participants, by far the biggest webinar that we've ever done for employers. We introduced a new CalPERS member news with a just staggering 50% open rate, helping members to understand the impacts of COVID-19, what it means for their pension, what it doesn't mean for their pension, addressing a lot of concerns. The questions really came from a gut level that we were getting there. People just asking, will I get my pension check next month? Will I get a pension when I retire? That was the level of kind of like concern that we were getting. And so it's no surprise, but it's still positive that we got such a massive open rate on this communication. We provide the digital perspective blog. Marcy or Ms. Frost did a presentation to the California Professional Firefighters very early in this. Michael Cohen presented to the League of California Cities. We've been authoring stakeholder emails to the top folks from the CEO that let them know what's going on, offer them that reassurance, and these are things that are being distributed out to the members. And we continue to do online versions of our regular roundtable meetings, briefings with members, retirees, and employers. So we're doing what we can to stay in touch here and really ramping up efforts in the COVID-19 reality. So with that, I'll pause. That concludes my presentation, Mr. President, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, I thank you for the presentation and keep up the good work, but I don't see any questions, so thank you very much. Okay, okay. So now we will move to summary of board direction. Ms. Frost.
Yes, thank you. So the first one I have is to bring back to the next meeting, that would be in July, an action item related to, we do not have a bill number on this yet, but it would be sponsored by Assemblymember Stone. It has to do with the merging of 2 fire districts that would be currently prohibited under our current laws around employers and benefits that they are allowed to contract with CalPERS. And then the second is to initiate some research into what we believe the impact of the new DOL guidance on allowing private equity into DC plans. And Mr. Rubalcaba is correct that those would be done through target date funds. And so we'll bring some analysis back. That will not be in July. I'll give you a date on when we can get that accomplished.
Okay, well, thank you. And so, Mr. Rubalcaba, is that a question or are you just
Yes.
making a comment? Okay.
I think there was also, I think you also gave direction, or maybe it was Rob, that to come back in July as to Kaiser's reluctance to make a concession on the rate
Oh,
renewal.
that was, I was asked. Yeah, that's right. Thank you. Yeah, good point. Okay. Okay, well, that appears to be it. And so normally we would say safe travels back home, but safe travels from room 1 to room 2. So everyone stay safe and we'll see you next month. Okay, bye-bye.